Okay, so you founded Roivant Sciences in 2014. You got $100 million in startup funding from QVT and other investors. And then you end up raising another $360 million for the subsidiary, Axovant Sciences?
Yeah, so the whole Roivant model was, so maybe I should go into the business for a second, because then you'll understand how the money was raised. So the whole business of Roivant was run the business more efficiently than standard pharmaceutical companies by doing two things. One is there were certain areas where Big Pharma had decided they're not going to develop these medicines. Why? Just because they're groupthink. They're a bunch of lemmings, if I may say so, right? They all go in certain directions in packs at the same time. Now, why do they do that? The second issue is the failure of incentives. So if you're a scientist in Big Pharma, right, or if you're somebody who is developing Lipitor or whatever at Pfizer years ago, that's a drug for cholesterol levels. If you take the risk and you succeed, you don't personally participate in that upside at all, okay? But if you take that personal risk and you fail, you might lose your job. You might even lose your budget the next year. And so a lot of those people are in no rush to get to the answer. They'd rather have the answer take a long time. They get their job, collect their paycheck in the meantime. And they think in packs, because if you're the only person, let's just take all the companies in the big pharmaceutical industry, and you're the one who defects in the other direction, you take a risk that the others didn't take, and you fail, you face the downside for it. But if you take the same risk everybody else is taking and everybody fails, then hey, you were just doing what the pack did and you couldn't be personally blamed for it. So that was a structural failure in the pharmaceutical industry. So what I did is say, hey, a lot of hedge funds, from my own experience, the way they operate, it's even how I made money, is to say, you get a cut of the profit that you generate. So what if you ran a pharmaceutical company the same way? What if you recruited scientists to say, hey, you get uncapped upside in the projects that you work on, but you actually get to take the risk in the way that an owner would. That was the premise of Roivant. So Roivant's, philosophy, it says ROI, or the first three letters, return on investment, was part of the philosophy of Roivant. So you got the parent company that would set up these subsidiary pods. Many hedge funds are structured this way, structured a pharmaceutical company this way, where the people who work on those individual projects are actually working at a mini company within the company, and they get equity in their own individual projects. So Roivant's model was set up these individual Vants, we called them, right? So Roivant is the parent company, and then we set up these Vants: Axovant, Myovant, Urovant, Enzavant. The list goes on. There have been 20 plus of these Vants that Roivant has launched, where the people who work there get upside in their own projects, and then the parent company owns all of them. So Roivant has its employees, and then each of the subsidiaries, Dermavant, et cetera, have their own employees at their own subsidiaries as well. And so the goal would be, as a pharmaceutical company, you're going to have some bets that succeed, some that fail, but have more successes that are large enough to make up for the failures, and do that better than Big Pharma by also reducing the cost of drug development by giving people the incentives to get to those answers more quickly. So that was the founding premise of the business. So Roivant started with its own money, and then each of those subsidiaries, or at least certain of those subsidiaries, raised their own capital at a certain point in time, even though they were subsidiaries of Roivant. That was the way the business was structured. It's kind of similar to how Alphabet is the parent company of Google, right? But they've got a lot of other subsidiaries. Some of those bring in money into their own subsidiaries. Some of them don't. Berkshire Hathaway is a parent company of children companies. That's a similar model to how Roivant was structured as well. And so, so started Roivant. Roivant was a private company. And then we set up a number of subsidiaries: Axovant, Myovant, Urovant, all of which actually did their own IPOs. But Roivant still remained the majority owner of those companies.
Well, right, because Axovant had an IPO, and the market value ended up being almost $3 billion.
Yep.
So now you're CEO of a $3 billion company. But then in 2017, Axovant actually announced that one of its drugs, intepirdine?
Yeah, it was the drug for Alzheimer's, yeah.
Exactly. Had failed its clinical trials, and then the value dropped by 75% in one day.
Yep, that's biotech. And so the overall story of Roivant, you think about, so Roivant's now a public company. So the subsidiaries of Roivant that have gone public, Axovant, Myovant, Urovant, Immunovant, and then now Roivant's public too, is exactly the founding premise of the business. Some are going to work, some are going to fail. Myovant and Urovant have been acquired at prices higher than they went public and talk about billions of dollars of aggregate value across Myovant, Urovant. Immunovant's still a public company. Went public for $10. I don't know if the stock's trading at $30 to $40 in that range is where it trades in recent months. Roivant went public as a parent company, trades above where it is, and Axovant went public and had a drug that failed for Alzheimer's disease. That was the whole idea, is you got to take risks. You got to actually develop drugs that pharma isn't willing to develop. That means some of them are going to fail, but have enough successes to make up for the failures. And 5 years in, probably one of the most valuable things that happened was the failure of that Alzheimer's drug, because it trained the company early on to say, you know what? You're going to take risks. You're going to have failures along the way. And it wasn't the last failure. You have other small drugs that have failed along the way too. But the company is built to make sure that the engine that produces those drugs is still stronger, learns from every success and failure. Guess what? Now, 7 years in, I was CEO for 7 years. Now Roivant's 10 years old, but I led it as CEO for 7 years. 5 of the drugs that Roivant developed while I was CEO are now FDA-approved therapies for patients. And it's close to $10 billion publicly traded company on the NASDAQ. And it's returned over $1.5 billion to shareholders on top of that as well. And that's within 10 years of life as a biotech company. And so I'm incredibly proud of what the company did, and a lot of lessons that I would take from that experience to share with founders as I can today. And even some of the founders that I work with in starting new companies. I've started several companies since Roivant. Those lessons have been invaluable at every step of the way.